So, welcome everybody to today's lecture number 43, called Several Types of Lustful Eyes. This is such an important lecture because in order to advance in our inner work and start the process of creation, we must develop chastity. So, the objective of this lecture is to identify some of the lustful defects that prevent us from reaching chastity. If we do not reach chastity, we are not even going to start the process of creating ourselves internally. So, let's start by explaining what chastity is. Chastity is exactly contrary to lust, the opposite of lust. Chastity is the wise use of our energy, while lust is the misuse of our energy. We need to understand the great value of our energy, especially our sexual creative energy, which we misuse and waste when we fornicate and spill it out our bodies. We can see lust in every misuse of energy we do through the different centers of our body: the mental, motor, emotional, instinctive, and of course the sexual center. This center receives the most quantity of energy to create, so it's the one that wastes the most. This energy has a great worth because with it we have the possibility to create, to create ourselves, creating the existential bodies of the being through the practice of suprasex with our partner. This practice has as a base the triangle of love that is supported by chastity, fidelity, and of course love. Whenever a person goes to work in sex, they need to have this triangle perfectly balanced, since these three forces are acting from moment to moment. If the person forgets love, he will fail in the practice because we need to love our inner work in our partner selflessly and unconditionally. If a person forgets fidelity, he will fail too, because this work only can be done with one partner. And last but not least, if the person forgets chastity, he will also fail, because he's not saving and appreciating his energy. Each one of these three forces will depend on the three primary forces. Chastity is directly related to the Holy Spirit, to sex and to non-fornication. Fidelity is related to balance with the Son and with justice. Love is related to the Father. All three forces have to come together in sex work. If sex is lack of any of these three forces, it will be very difficult for us to progress. Better to say impossible. So now let's talk about fire. When we talk about fire, we are talking about energy, especially the sexual energy. Fire has two aspects: an aspect that is given by the Kundalini and another aspect that is the Kunda buffer. So these two aspects are total opposites. The word Kundalini refers to the fire raising up the spinal cord, and the Kunda buffer is the fire descending to the atomic health of us, the humanoid. So chastity leads us to save and give our energy a wise use, making it ascend, and lust leads us to feed this Kunda buffer, making our energy descends and feeding the ego or the selves. We already know that the sexual creative energy creates. Its function is to create. For example, with an ovule and sperm, the species can reproduce. But you need to know that the other sperms that participate in copulation also are going to create. To create what? the psychological aggregates, of course. And guess what? That's how men fall from heaven. When the seed was spilled, all the selves or psychological defects were created. That's why men were expelled out from Eden, from the paradise or heaven. When we started fornicating in ancient times, very, very ancient times, I mean expelling the energy out of our bodies through ejaculation and orgasm, this energy became involutionary. It got polluted, so the 7 virtues of the soul flipped down and became the 7 capital sins we know today, the heads of legion as we also know them. And as we continue doing so, existence after existence, we continue creating more ego or defects and feeding them with our energy. That's how today we have millions and millions of defects. Now, we need to know that there are three types of sexology. The suprasex, which leads us to regeneration, to the creation of the children of light, is the sex of the gods. It's used to create or internally create ourselves. This is how everything that exists has been created, because every creation comes from that energy, the sexual. We also have the normal sex, used for the reproduction of the species. It is also a practice of suprasex, but here we are not going to create us internally, but a new creature. So we must ask our Divine Mother to help us in that process, and she's going to select the best seed, one seed or sperm that is going to fertilize the egg. This is called the Immaculate Conception. So listen to me when I say that there's no need to fornicate and spill millions of sperms for conception. And last, we also have the infrasex. This one leads us to degeneration, to the reproduction of the ego. Is the kind of sex that most of us practice just to satisfy our animal desires and lust without any transcendental purpose. Why should we study the eyes of lust? First, to develop chastity, so there could be creation. Second, to purify our energy, because in order to make it ascend, it needs to have a certain level of purity. And third, to obtain potency in the sexual practice, because these selves of lust have trapped all our sexual potency, and we are conditioned by them. When we start practicing suprasex, we may notice less potency, because we are not longer feeding these lustful defects. We are not practicing infrasexualities. So these defects get frustrated, and we may notice lower levels of potency and even not deciding to do the practice. But as we start eliminating them, we are going to free the fire and energy they have trapped, and we are going to recover the potency of the consciousness. So, to study the eyes of lust, we most know that the process of regeneration begins with the disintegration of the defects that we know we have. And we do this through intimate self-reflection directed by the Divine Mother. We need to reflect on when and how we created that eye, how many times we have fornicated in that way, what are the damages this eye caused me or is causing me, how this eye makes me waste and spill my energy, and so on, in order to judge ourselves, to understand, and then ask our Divine Mother to eliminate or disintegrate any detail of this eye that we are observing. Now, let us look at some of the eyes of lust. There are millions, but we'll only check a few so we can have an idea or a guide to start with. Lust manifests through three aspects: the desire, the mind, and the ill will. First, we have desire, to fornicate, then we justify that desire and then we act, we do it. So we need to check this structure in order to identify it and see the details of lust manifesting. So we have fornication, and you know that the fornication is spilling energy out of the body, which we do through orgasm and ejaculation. And this happens, the orgasm or ejaculation happens when we masturbate through nocturnal emissions, also known as wet dreams, and through vaginal sex. Why do we have nocturnal emissions? Let's start with this. First of all, because of the impressions that we receive through the five senses, and we do not eliminate at the moment what we see, what we hear, smell, taste, or touch. For example, if we see a person who seems attractive to us, so let's continue. I was saying that if we see a person who seems attractive to us and we do not work on that impression and all the details that are manifesting at that moment, we will pass on to identification. Then we will desire that person, remember him or her, fantasize about them, and by not fulfilling that desire, it will become frustrated. And most likely, when we go to sleep, there will be a lustful scene with that person, and there comes the nocturnal emission. And that's fornication, okay? Because we are expelling out our energy. Some other details that we will find in this defect are lasciviousness, frustrated sexual desire, provoking oneself, provoking another, pornography, imagining, acting, speaking, executing, planning, feeling, and wanting to carry out lustful acts, and so many others that we need to discover through self-observation. So now let's talk about masturbation. There are two types of masturbation, the solitary and the collaborative. In the solitary, we will find defects such as self-homosexuality, pornography, use of sex toys such as artificial vaginas or penises, vibrators, inflatables dolls, and other sex toys. In collaborative masturbation, we find details as the stimulation of another person, being masturbated by another person, or mutual masturbation, which can be manual or with sex toys. We also find anal sex, sodomy, oral sex, fellation, or cunnilingus. We also find very perverse defects such as bestiality, necrophilia, and so on. Anything that is sex out the vagina is masturbation, because sex, real sex, is the union of the penis and the vagina. Through masturbation, there is a process of fantasy and mechanical imagination, with sex scenes that fit the incubus and succubus defects, and we also need to eliminate them. Some of the consequences of masturbation are impotence, premature ejaculation, celibacy, and homosexuality. Homosexuality because these defects leads us to touch a person of the same sex who is oneself, and celibacy because this self wants us to be alone and not wanting to have a partner, so that we can continue masturbating ourselves, and these situations eliminate completely the possibility to create. So now let us look at the vaginal sex. Here we find defects such as the reproductive self, that has details such as the single self, the conqueror, pregnancy, sex during pregnancy, marriage, lactation, sex during lactation, the I mom, the IDAT, contraceptives, abortions, castrations, sexual degeneration, dissatisfaction, boredom of the partner. We also have the defect of prostitution, in which we find pornographic trade, selling or buying sex, the pimps. There are various types of prostitution, such as residence, streets, scores, referrals, etc. Some details can be very subtle. For example, when we have a relationship or marry a person with any interest, that's a detail of prostitution, and we must observe all that details. We also have the defect of adultery, in which we'll find infidelity towards the partner or adultering the practice of suprasex. We find here lovers, incest, swingers, the Juan Tenorio self, the Casanova self, love triangles, orgies, copulating several times a day, having sex while being sick, sexual abuse, forcing or self-forcing oneself to have sex, sadism, masochism, and many others perverse defects. We also have witchcrafts. And witchcraft is when a person knows the power of sex and does it with a dark interest. For example, uses that sexual energy to obtain material things, such as power, money, beauty, and so on. There are also other details such as love spells, sexual mooring, revenge, jealousy, manipulation, having sex in states of anger and hatred, well, all that. The previous syllabus prevent us from reaching chastity, fidelity, and love. To the extent that we study those selves, we are going to understand the errors that we have committed, and we will perfect the practices of sex. We will also achieve greater sexual power, since all these selves are part of the infrasex. By eliminating them, we can reach normal and suprasexuality. Okay? In alchemy, this process is called whitening the brass. So, this been the lecture for today. See you in the next lecture, and thank you all for being here today. Bye.